Thank you all for joining today's session. Today is the Facilitator and Evaluator training for the upcoming virtual tabletop exercises hosted for the Disaster Response Collaborative. Just a couple of acknowledgments and disclaimers up front. The agenda for today, we'll go through some introductions. I'll tell you a little bit more about who I am as the host, and then we'll also get to know who is joining us live today. Once we get to the introductions, we will go over an overview of the exercise, including its structure, the timing, the schedule, what you can expect as a facilitator or evaluator during the exercise itself. I am Chris McCarthy. My company is Emergency Preparedness Solutions, and we are supporting the exercises and drills for the Disaster Response Collaborative. In this next section, we're going to go over some just general information about the exercise, including the dates that are out there, again, a general format and a structure for the schedule, and then we'll get into more specifics about what some of those segments look like, as well as your roles as a facilitator or evaluator. So everyone that is here today will have either completed, or the team lead for your DRC facility would have completed a questionnaire that indicated which date your facility is going to participate in based on your topic area that's listed here. The training today is not going to be specific to any one topic. Today's training is focused on your role as either a facilitator or an evaluator in any one of the VTTXs for these 4 topic areas. Just keep in mind that if you do have any changes or want to participate in a different date, please do reach out to myself and to the DRC communications, just so that we can make sure that we have you down for the date that you intend on participating. For the structure of the exercise, these are a 3-hour virtual environment exercise. So I do recommend that those that are joining either virtually or if you are gathering as in one room, several individuals, that you set a little bit of time to show up early, maybe 10 minutes early to the Zoom environment, as well as any physical meeting room. You leave a little time past that 3 hours because you may want to continue the discussion, or at least leave a buffer there. So again, the exercise itself will be 3 hours. All the exercises start at 1 p.m. Central Time and end at 4 p.m. Central Time. Again, that's how long the virtual environment will be open. In this session today, I'll describe a little more detail around the items you're seeing on the screen, but in that 3 hours, the bulk of that time is spent in the breakout rooms, and that's really where your role as a facilitator or an evaluator comes in. When you're in the breakout room, those discussions are happening, facilitated by the facilitator, observed and notated by the evaluator. We'll have an opportunity to come back and share those discussions in the large group with other facilities that are participating in the same date. The other important thing to keep in mind is that as you're having these discussions in your breakouts, as you're capturing the notes and the conversation, it is up to your facility to complete evaluation of that exercise outcomes, to produce an after-action report and improvement plan based on your facility. The important thing to keep in mind as a facilitator and an evaluator is that you are running the discussion in the breakout rooms, that you'll be responsible for capturing that conversation and then completing an after-action report for your own facility. The DRC will also be collecting some data around that after-action report, which are, as typical with the after-action report for a tabletop exercise, you'll have your strengths that you discussed in your plan, the gaps or areas of opportunities in your plan, and then any action items that you'll be doing after the exercise to further develop your plans. The exercise objectives are really based around, like I mentioned a couple of times already, your facility's plans. So we hope to have you articulate the contents and elements contained in your disaster plans at your facility for that given DRC focus area. So for instance, if your facility is participating in the DRC under the reunification focus area, you'll want to come to this exercise prepared as a facilitator, as an evaluator, really even as a participant, prepared to discuss what's in your existing facility plans for that given topic, like I was giving the example for your reunification plans. In that discussion, you'll be validating the alignment of those plans with the recommended activities that you'll find in the checklist of essential pediatric considerations for hospital disaster plans, that checklist from the EMSC, EIIC. And lastly, as I've mentioned in the last slide, you're identifying those areas for improvement as well as the strengths, and then documenting what linkages or further development may need to happen in that plan based on the discussions that you have in the exercise. Since this is a discussion-based tabletop exercise, it's really important that you focus the conversation as a facilitator and the evaluator on the plans. This is a open, no-fault environment. We're not testing people or their performance in this situation or in the context of these plans. We really want to keep the conversation and discussions focused on the content of the plans. And we say it a couple of times here on this slide, but please assume that the scenarios that we give you before each breakout, that they are plausible, that they are or could happen in your locality. The assumption is that this situation may be happening, but we don't give you a lot of specific details so that you aren't getting tied down to, again, in the specific outcomes or what a specific player might do in that given scenario. The scenario is set to set the stage for that discussion around what's in your plans. The scenarios were developed with the support of the DRC oversight groups, those that will be facilitating the ongoing sessions for each topic area. And so they helped us develop some scenarios that, while fictional, do have elements of realism, situations that have happened or that we've seen before. And really the point of those scenarios, like I've mentioned before, is to set the stage for the discussion. We want you to assume that that incident can happen in your area, but assume that there may be some artificiality there in that the scenario is, again, just really meant to set up the discussion and be a starting point for you as a facilitator as you begin each breakout room discussion. I mentioned it's a 3-hour exercise, so here we're giving you a little more specifics around the timing of those 3 hours. We do begin with a quick 15-minute overview brief, very similar to what you're hearing right now in the training, where we go over the structure and the guidelines, the objectives, and the schedule for the exercise. Then after that overview, we jump into the first modules breakout. And as I'm going to demonstrate here soon, that each module starts with a scenario inject. Again, that's a fictional brief scenario to start the discussion. And then everyone is able to join their breakout room. And again, I'll demonstrate what that looks like from the Zoom menu, but each facility is going to have their own breakout room by facility name, and the participants and facilitators, evaluators will self-select to go into their facility's breakout room. We do those breakouts 3 times, where there's 30 minutes of discussion in the breakout room. We come back from that 30 minutes and back into the large virtual environment where we spend 10 minutes sharing. So each facility or most facilities, depending on how many are on that given exercise, will have the opportunity to share just a couple of highlights, and then we're back into the breakout room for another 30 minutes. We do that 3 times. After the 3 breakout rooms, there's a little bit of wrap up, final comments and reminders from me as a host. And then the last 30 minutes of that 3 hours, everyone heads back into their facility breakout rooms, where you can hold your hot wash and start into that after action process, even while we're still in the virtual environment. So next few slides, I'm going to just give an example of what a module could look like. Again, this training is generalized for all the topic areas, so you're not going to see something that's always going to necessarily apply to your given exercise. I used one of the discussion questions from one of the topics, so just keep in mind that the next few slides are a demonstration, an example of what one of the modules may look and feel like on the day of the exercise. So The first slide in a module, like I mentioned, will be a scenario inject. So here you can kind of see how it's formatted. It's a narrative inject. There's not a ton of patient details. There may be some numbers of patients or people involved in a particular incident. There may be some mentions of specific symptomatology or potential hazards or infectious vectors like this one. However, again, I just want to stress that the details in this scenario aren't important to the exercise play. What's important is it's this kind of a situation. Now let's get into the breakout rooms and have a discussion about what our plans say, or maybe don't say, about addressing this particular type of hazard and situation. This is what you and all the players will see, the slides you'll see before you go into the breakout rooms. This will be very guided. I'll open up the breakout rooms when we're on this slide. They'll be listed by facility name, and each individual player, if they're virtual and playing virtually, or the person managing the computer, the terminal in the room with a number of people, if that's how you choose to gather, you'll just need to select your given breakout room from that computer or that terminal. We give some reminders here on this slide that it'll last for 30 minutes, and then we have everybody join. Now, this is an example of what you would see or what you would be sharing in the breakout room. And by you, I'm talking about the facilitators, or some facilitators in the past have asked their evaluator to display the slides. And so they're taking notes and then moving to the next slide with the next question. But this is an example of one of the question prompts for one of the modules. So when you receive the materials as a facilitator and evaluator, one of the items, the documents that you'll receive is a PowerPoint a slideshow for the entire exercise. That'll include the slides that I am using as a host. You do not need to care for those slides, the ones that I'm covering as a host, but for each module, you will see there are slides in each module that have these discussion questions. These discussion questions are also found in the facilitator guide. I'm going to talk a little bit about documents later in this session, but I just wanted to acknowledge that the questions, there'll be multiple questions here for you to display on the screen in the breakout room, and you will be responsible for sharing those slides, sharing that slide deck with those questions when you're in the breakout room as a facilitator or evaluator, if that's how you divvy those roles. So keep in mind, not only do you as a facilitator need to join the breakout room, but you will also need to share these slides in the breakout room so that the in-person and virtual participants can see the discussion question that you're facilitating at that time. We have that 30 minutes where you'll have these discussion questions. You're able to share those. You're able to go through the discussion questions. We do not expect every facilitator to get through every question prompt in every breakout room. There will be at least 4, if not 5 or 6 discussion questions for each module in this exercise. And that's where we give you, as a facilitator, the decision of which of those discussion questions are going to be best fit for the discussion in your breakout room. So again, there may be up to 6 discussion questions provided for each module. You do not need to try and get through all 6 discussion questions in each 30-minute breakout room. Once the 30 minutes are up, you'll see a countdown in the room, and then after that 30 minutes, it'll just bring everybody back into the main room, and that's where we'll have that opportunity to share for 10 minutes. I recommend it be either the facilitator or the evaluator that shares back and reports out some of those highlights. But if you have somebody that's on the team, any players that are playing and they would like to speak up, again, it's not required that it either be a facilitator or an evaluator who shares those highlights. It's just that those are typically the folks that have the notes right in front of them. We've just demonstrated what one of those modules looks like from start to end, starting with the scenario all the way through to that large group sharing. And then if this were module 1, we would get right into a second module, a third module, and then after a quick wrap up, after those 3 modules, we will be placing everybody back into the breakout rooms so that you being the facilitator and evaluators, you can facilitate that hot wash discussion right at the end of the exercise, rather than ending the exercise after the third module and then leaving it to you to have that hot wash and start into that after action process. We've provided the space here in the virtual environment, so that, again, it'll be in the breakout rooms for the last 30 minutes of the 3 hours, where you can use these question prompts. This is, again, the flow of that after action report. What worked well? What were some strengths in the plan? What were some gaps or areas of improvement in the plan? And then what are some additional work or action items to do to continue development on that plan? Now we're going to cover a little bit more detail your role as a facilitator or evaluator during these tabletop exercises. For the facilitator, the main two tasks or activities that you'll be doing as a facilitator are distributing the exercise participant conduct brief. So that's part of the document package that you will receive after attending this training. But that one document is really the only document that doesn't leave you as a facilitator or evaluator. The participants' conduct brief will give them the virtual link if they're joining virtual. It'll give them, again, the date, the time, all the overview, all the details that we talked about just a moment ago around just the structure and the what to expect in the exercise. And then in that participant brief, it also gives them the scenario injects so that they can reference back to those during the discussion. The distribution of that will be up to the facilitator. Again, I'll be delivering document packages to individual facilitators, and then from there, it is up to the facilitator to distribute that conduct brief and share the materials with the evaluator. The other main activity that the facilitator is responsible for is, of course, ensuring that productive discussion in the breakout room. That is the main purpose for a facilitator. It's to ensure that the discussion is progressing, that we are capturing or noting those key points in the discussion. The evaluator, as I mentioned next to that, is really there to observe and assess the input and from the discussions. You may provide some feedback based on what you hear or a recap of what you hear, but we do encourage the evaluators to take an observational role so that the discussion is between those facilitators and the players, their knowledge or what they see in those plans. I've mentioned them several times, so now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the documents that you can expect to receive, and then, like I mentioned, as your role as a facilitator, the one that you will need to distribute. Before I talk about those, I do see a question in the text chat. The question is, I assume we can either get everyone at our facility to get together in one room or have everyone join from their own computer. Great question, and the answer is both. We have seen in this format, based on the layout of your facility or how many campuses or buildings you even may have on just one campus, often there is a group of some number of folks, 3, 4, 6, 12, that gather in a conference room. We do ask that if you gather in a conference room that you have that technology, the ability to present and join on the virtual environment. And then anyone who can't make it there physically into the room has the link, so they can join virtually. And that's why it's very important that even a room of a number of people are connected to the virtual environment. So whether it's in the large group or in the breakouts, everybody can actively participate. The document package will consist of 5 items. The first 4 that are listed there are really only meant for facilitators and evaluators. I would say even if there's a DRC team lead, if they have a role to play as a player in the exercise play, I would recommend not sharing these first 4 items with even that team lead, because if they have a role as a player, they should head in like any other player where they have the participant conduct brief, but the discussion questions, they're not going to know what you're going to ask until they're in there in that discussion discussing the plans. So there's the situation manual, which includes some guidance for facilitators and evaluators, very similar to some of the guidance I'm giving today. The next thing is the exercise evaluator observation form. As I mentioned, that'll be the key tool for the evaluator to document the comments, the discussion, the questions, even action items that may come up in either the breakouts or especially the hot wash. There is the host and facilitator slides, which again are the slides I'm using in the main room during the exercise, and then they also contain the slides with the discussion questions that the facilitator will need to present or share in the virtual environment during the breakout rooms. And then lastly, something that goes really hand in hand with the evaluator observation form is an after action report and improvement plan template. That document has a lot of the same matrices and note-taking spaces that you see on the observation form. And the thought there is if you're not using your own facilities forms to document observations or complete an AAR, that it's really easy for the team, the DRC team, to take the notes off the evaluator's observation form, just cut and paste, and put them right into similar fields that are in the after action template. So when you receive the document package, when those are sent, you'll see what I'm talking about, where that evaluator form is meant to just feed, cut and paste information right into the after action report when you start developing that. So those are the 4 items that are meant just for facilitators and evaluators only. And then lastly, as I mentioned previously, there's an exercise participant conduct brief. All of the documents will come as in PDF format. So all you'll need to do is take that exercise participant conduct brief and send that to the players who you know will be coming to your either conference room or will be joining virtually to participate in the VTTX from your facility. I'm going to give a little more definition around that breakout room. We've talked about this a little bit, but to be clear, as you'll see, when I open the breakout rooms, you and all the participants will be able to self-select. I'll just keep in mind that myself as a host, I'll remain in the main room to ensure that if there's any participants, especially those that are joining virtually, may not be joining the large group that might gather at one facility, I'll stay in the main room to ensure if anybody has troubles moving into the breakout room, I can manually push individuals into those breakout rooms. But really, right as soon as you as a facilitator and evaluator get into the breakout room, please start the discussion. Again, you'll share those slides on the screen with those discussion questions. You'll start prompting the group to start the discussion, and the evaluator is noting and documenting the conversations as they happen. What you will see, all participants, evaluators, facilitators, everyone in the virtual environment, you will see 3 warnings before the room closes. You will get a 10-minute alert, both audio and text prompt that comes in your breakout room, letting you know there's 10 minutes remaining. Another advisement at 5 minutes remaining, and then when there's 1 minute remaining in that 30 minutes of breakout, you'll see a clock start to count down 60 seconds. And at that moment, you can choose to just have everybody move back to the main virtual room, or just at the end of that 60-second countdown, everybody will automatically be brought back into the main room for that 10 minutes of sharing. As I've mentioned before, the facilitator or designee will need to share at least a couple of highlights. It typically takes about a minute, being it that we could have as many as 10 facilities on one virtual tabletop exercise event. That's where it really needs to be just high point highlights from as many breakout groups as we can in that 10 minutes before we return into the breakouts. And then, as always, as a facilitator, evaluator, even the participants, if something isn't working in the breakout room, the main room will still be open. I'll be there to assist with anything we run into from a technical aspect. Some additional just guidelines or I would say best practices for the facilitators are what you see on the screen. I'll remind you that both for the facilitator and the evaluator, there is a longer, there's more detail advising you on what your role is, some best practices like that. You'll find that in the facilitator guide situation manual when those documents are delivered. So don't feel if you're not capturing everything that you see on the screen right here. If you go back to watch the recording, you will have all of these details rather available in that situation manual when it's delivered. But I'll just pick out here. I think the biggest best practice that I can share for a facilitator would be managing that time and engagement. It's really natural in any scenario-based exercise, but even these where we don't provide a lot of details, we often have participants, players, who start to make up some artificialities. They start deciding, well, it was this many patients and this is what they're presenting with. And as a facilitator, it's really your role to acknowledge, you know, it's good that we're thinking about how we might specifically respond or act as an individual, but let's get that conversation refocused back on the plans. What is in our plan? What have we planned for? What maybe are we discussing here that our plans don't account for? So that's where it's really important for a facilitator to manage the time and engagement around the plans discussion to ensure that you can maximize that 30 minutes of discussion for each breakout room. There are some additional best practices for evaluators, and again, the one that I would point to is really staying objective. I've even heard, just in some side conversations with DRC participants before today, I've heard that they're considering bringing in some evaluators who aren't, you know, directly in that part of the hospital or aren't directly involved in the given plans that are being discussed. I've even heard of one facility considering asking some staff from a different facility. It's another children's hospital in town, but thinking about inviting some folks in who can really remain objective, just capture the notes, capture the discussion, so that those notes can be used in the after actioning report. It's crucial that the evaluator is staying attuned to what's being said, capturing as much of it as possible, and that may even be where, depending on the size of your team or how engaged your team typically is in these types of discussions, you may decide to have multiple evaluators just for the sake of note keeping. Now, I've mentioned the feedback and after action reports. Again, your role as a facilitator and an evaluator is crucial, both in guiding the conversation, keeping it on track, and then documenting it so that you have robust information to use when you start getting into the hot wash, and then ultimately preparing an after action report and improvement plan. So here's just some reminders. I mean, anyone that is familiar with the HC doctrine, you know that it's really the point of these exercises is to learn, you know, what's working, what isn't working, and then make some decisions about what needs to either change or be developed further. And then that feeds into the cycle where you're able to either exercise it again, or potentially even the next step might be more of a functional exercise or drill itself. So again, this after action report is a critical step after you've completed this exercise to ensure that you know what you're going to do moving forward as you continue to develop and exercise these disaster plans for your facility. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should have a green share button. That's an arrow and a green box. You can share your screen. Keep that in mind when you're sharing, when the sharing button comes up, if you're working off of multiple screens and you're the facilitator, you're the one putting up the slides, ensure that when the pop-up window comes, when you click share, that you're selecting the correct window or screen. I do recommend that you share a window rather than sharing your entire screen, like screen 1 or screen 2. When the menu or the pop-up shows up after you hit the share button, look through there and it'll actually list the applications kind of like at the bottom of your computer screen where all the applications are listed. Zoom does the same thing. So if you only want to share the PowerPoint slides that you're going to use for the discussion questions, you can actually select that specific application rather than sharing the whole screen. The Zoom link to join the actual exercise will be contained in those materials, both in the situation manual and facilitator guide for everyone that's here, facilitators and evaluators, and then in the same spot, but in the participant conduct brief, that's where they'll find that link. It'll be right next to like the date and time of the exercise, so that it's easy. If you'd like to create a meeting invite to send to participants, that is something that you can do. We do not send a meeting invite. We are just sharing the exercise documents that have the meeting information, and then it's on you as a facilitator to distribute and invite the correct people. My contact information will be available in the materials. As always, you can email me using the email you see on the screen here. The DRC main communications, their email is here as well. Again, if you've got questions about the date you're attending, if you want to switch dates, I do recommend that you communicate just to the DRC inbox as well as myself. That way we've got visibility, we know who's joining which event. That concludes today's training session for facilitators and evaluators in the DRC virtual tabletop exercises. Contact information for both myself as well as the DRC main communications are on the screen. You will be seeing more communications from me, but please let me know if I can help you as a facilitator or evaluator. We're excited to host. Thanks again for joining today.